propose to them. I'm not sure I used to know the director very well. Okay, let's start it. Good morning. Show everybody. Now I'll go away. Moving very slowly this morning because it's freezing. And 3D. You guys want to do a search, LaGuardia 3D? I suggest LaGuardia Studio Creative Tech Week 3D competition is due in $1,000 in value. What's in 3D printing value? So it's not the moulash, it's actually just the. So in conjunction with Creative Tech Week 2016, LaGuardia Studio is hosting an open call competition for 3D project submissions. The winning entry for the 4 competition categories will be awarded a 3D printing of up to $1,000 in value. There are 4 additional honorable mentions for $250 worth of free 3D printing. Competition is free and submission eligibility includes individuals or teams with an NYU affiliation. Students, faculty, and staff with 3D related projects are encouraged to apply. All details for the competition. Due date is, did you find it, anybody? It's called LaGuardia Studio. Sorry, it's LaGuardia Studio 3D project submissions. April 15th, that's what I thought. So, April 15th is when? Not very far away. What I'd like to submit is 2 team projects that have to do with the LaGuardia Place reimagining. I have an agreement from the let's do scheduling. Have you got your final schedules out? Who's leaving town before the end of exam week?
What date is that?
Last day of class is actually the 9th, which is a Monday. So our last class is actually the 3rd of May, right? I have 2 invitations for you. Does anybody want to come to Boulder and help the students in Boulder, Colorado, build and open the tree office there on the 5th of May? You're invited. I don't know how we fund that, but it'll be fun. The students there are all doing architecture and 3D printing architecture and how 3D manufacturing applies to that. The tree, I think it's a beautiful linden tree, and we're doing linden lemonade with it. And we're also cross-dressing the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art. And in fact, this is one of the first, well, it's the second I've got, so it can't be the first. The National Endowment for the Arts started doing these placemaking grants, which you should know of. Just have a look at NEA and placemaking. And this is a conspicuous effort to recognize that artists are involved in making place, right? that art, its cultural value is not inside necessarily museums and cultural institutions, but in public spaces and in the, and so this is the first time the National Endowment for the Arts has really what is intuitive to most of us, right? That it's the creative community that really, well, it's not, it's the, how would, actually like to hear how you would put it. How would you say that the Lower East Side, you know, what defines the Lower East Side? Or what defines LaGuardia Place? Because this is actually the larger discussion I wanted to have today about strategies for resistance to kind of creative, delightful, health improving strategies that I just want to review your ideas of what it is that we're up against when we are proposing creative alternatives. But before we discuss that, because of, okay, let me restate the question. And this was something I didn't yet put in my letter. The challenge we have in participating in the LaGuardia, Bleecker Place, and the other green spaces is not a lack of desire, right? It's not a lack of good ideas. It's not a lack of need to have good ideas. What is the challenge we face?
The lack of an implementation system to actually make our desires a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jurisdiction over working.
How to participate is how I would say. How to participate in the process that has gone on, which is not really imaginative, right? Is not really exciting, is not really inclusive. There's one, you know, perfectly fine landscape architect who's been drawing up and had lots of contracts with the city and the Parks Department because she probably delivers on time and she's low maintenance and she does what they want, right? But there's the big crisis is that one of agency, right?
It's very closed door.
Exactly. And this is the center of the free world, right? Arguably. People in DC say that. If we can't participate here, what kind of participatory democracy is this, right? In New York City, the cultural capital of the country, let's say, not the world, a cultural capital. So I wanted to sort of, does that make sense to you? Is that, would you agree? How would, so I'd like to hear in your own experiences, places in your hometowns, in your history, in your summer camps, in your, you know, I'm particularly interested in hearing your ideas, Sam, about how participation has worked in other contexts to act on our shared environment, right? Good examples at your schools, high schools. I'll give you one example of, again, from my, this is the first class I've talked to about my kids so much, but my, the vegan, fierce feminist that just got into Berkeley is, she goes to a little school called Little Red. It's with Irwin down here. And it is interesting because it has a long history of Pinko activity. The Reds, in fact, the most famous alumni from it are the Weather Underground. You know, the people who blew themselves up on 11th Street, not all of them, but an activist group in the 70s. Also, the parents, the most famous alumni parents of the school are the Rosenbergs, who were killed for communism, right? delightful academic middle class couple. Do you know the story?
No.
It's worth knowing. The Rosenbergs were put to death for being communists. Yeah, sorry, it was just a think. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, Wikipedia, were American citizens who spied for the Soviet Union and were executed for conspiracy to commit espionage and passing information about the atomic bomb to the Soviets. Why do you think they were passing information about the atomic bomb to the Soviets? If everyone has this, then no one's going to develop it, right? No unfair advantage. It's the idea that there was a huge moral dilemma, particularly in the Jewish community, that so here they were, a nice academic couple. I think they were both does anybody know the history of the Manhattan Project?
Manhattan or Manhattan?
No, the Manhattan Project. This is the development of the atomic bomb.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In New Mexico, right?
Yeah. Let's go to the.
Einstein was involved.
In fact, all academics were involved. And how do you think they felt about it?
They may have felt guilty for participating.
The letters, the guilt, the anti-nuclear, they were the main anti-nuclear developers, the activists, in fact. What was I think really interesting about this project was that there was some funding to work on a really hard project, which had a lot of fundamental physics and engineering involved. They had it signed by urged the United States to take steps to acquire stockpiles of uranium ore and accelerate the research from Enrico Fermi, the Fermi labs in Europe, into nuclear chain reactions. They had it signed by Einstein and delivered to Franklin Roosevelt. Okay, you could read about this. It's, I think, a really important issue, because what the hell were academics doing developing weapons of mass destruction? I mean, the weapon of mass destruction. What was going on here? How could that possibly have happened? And what you see in the letters thereafter is the kind of hand-wringing of, we never wanted the bomb to be dropped. The rhetoric was always about developing it for, for doing the science, for developing it for deterrence. And the kind of horror to be responsible for that number of deaths. And I think Obama has to write a letter, every president has to write a letter about what they would do. I don't know if this is, as again, I try to not engage too much in American history, what they would do if faced with that kind of choice. And every year there's a letter from the president or the mayor of I'm not sure which, Nagasaki or US and Japanese apologies for war crimes, a letter to the citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay. my point is not to revisit this horror, but to say there was a whole lot of interested, smart people working on what they thought was an important problem. That in intensive, funded, working with people they admired, solving a really hard problem very quickly. It's, the paradigm of how to do intense research. The paradigm of how we could do intense research on re-enabling green spaces and natural systems engineering here. Attracting the best and the brightest, finding some funding, working hard on it. What made that work to get it achieved, and what made it work, what made it a complete failure in terms of the moral authorship of the people involved.
You're asking us this.
Just a little question for the morning. They did have creative agency, right? And they thought they had agreed on this was a deterrent. This was research. Who cares where the funding comes from, right? As a researcher, I have one friend, actually, two friends. One friend who I went through with, who's my peer, who's at CMU, who runs the Create Lab. Anyone's interested in doing masters or PhD, and he has systematically, he used to run the Robotics Institute, but he refuses to take any military funding his entire academic career. He's the only person I know out of hundreds of, of those on the engineering side. My own research at Xerox PARC was funded by whatever it's called. I'll put this out of my head. Department of Defense, the DARPA, Defense Advanced Research. I was doing ubiquitous computing. I did this thing called a live wire. It's worth knowing about because it's actually become, strangely, an important reference. If you look up wiggling string, John Seely Brown, calm computing. Calm Tech, then and now, yeah. He's actually just done a new version of it. This was the director of the Xerox PARC. Xerox PARC was another place like the Manhattan Project. Lots of smart people together, funding for research, corporate rather than military. But JSB, as we called him, I did this thing called the live wire. So all it was, does anybody know what the internet is doing at the moment? It was called an ambient display, this idea of ubiquitous computing, because that was the time in the early 90s when actually we built the very first handheld computer. Did I tell you the story about this? TV company came in and I was working on it because I'd written some of the software and I'd also done this wrist attachment for it, which was, there's a very famous scene out of Taxi Driver where the switchblade comes out like this. Anyway, this was a wrist-wearing pad computer. Really, 1994 or 5, right? A long time ago. Were you born then? Yeah, anyway. And so the mount that I had on it was, you put it out and it kept sliding down, the 4-bar mechanism sliding down into you, and then you could write on it. So I thought it was cool. And kind of wearable computing needs kind of interesting gestures that that make them So in imagining what a world would look like where everyone carried around a small computer instead of having desktop computers, this was my thing. The TV company said, can you do that so that, I mean, this was a little prototype I built, right? And the camera wanted to get the shot from the front of the hand of me going like that. And so they had me doing it over and over again. And then my prototype broke and I went smashing, flying into the lens and broke their very expensive lens, which was did not make me popular. But nonetheless, it demonstrated this idea of, what's the point I'm making? I know you're thinking, what? Creative agency over reimagining our workspace. The live wire, the calm computing. What could computing have been? Talking about information overload and stress and eye strain and sitting is the new smoking. Did you read the articles about that? Did you get that?
It's 10 o'clock.
This idea of calm computing, where the live wire that he's referencing there was a wire that hung down from the connected into the internet, and it wiggled. That's all it did. It wiggled when the proportions. It was a little motor that had programmed that when packets went through, it went faster. So very simple, if you will, network sniffer. That, you know, when someone was doing a big file transfer and the network was slowed down, you could see, you could in fact hear the live wire wiggling in the corner without having to have another thing in your screen to monitor network traffic. It was just in the background. People would sit around it and have coffee just because it was part of the ambient. I'm going to have another cup while it's so busy. I'll go back. You know, it just became part of the information weather, if you will, and a reason to talk about the unseen internet, right? What that is. How we were imagining it into our space. Does that make sense to you? I mean, that's why JSB called it the basis of calm computing, because why would he call it calm computing? That's information you're getting ambiently, tacitly, in a similar way that you're getting information in the park, right? You can hear the birds. They're not in your face saying, right? You can hear the wind through, you know, the windstorms that we've had these last, you know, you can hear the rustle, you can see, but it's not in your face demanding your attention for you to read the weather report, to get the wind speed, to get the, you know, biodiversity report. It's information that's ambient. And how much of that ambient information can we process?
Probably a lot more.
Exactly. So creating our working environments is something, as we said, we have the creative agency to do. So to go back, the Manhattan Project, they created an environment where they got a lot of work done on a hard problem, brought a lot of smart people together, but they didn't have agency over how that knowledge was used, right? And that was very problematic for them. The crisis and the well-organized anti-nuclear organizations that have fought and created nuclear controls since then have come from that guilt. In fact, the Exploratorium, you know, the Exploratorium in San Francisco, has anyone ever been to the greatest science wonder museum in the world? It's really a lovely place. The two brothers that were physicists who set that up, I'm forgetting their names. One of them was involved in the Manhattan Project. Frank Oppenheimer J. Robert Oppenheimer. The Exploratorium opened to the public in the fall of 1969. Richard Nixon was president, and the Vietnam War and racial tensions continued to divide the nation. Neil Armstrong had just blah, blah. Frank Oppenheimer, then 57 years old, had already had 3 life-shaping careers before coming to San Francisco. Brilliant physicist in his own right, he'd been a university professor and worked beside his brother, J. Robert Oppenheimer, known to some as the father of the atomic bomb, on the Manhattan Project of the 1940s. Barred from pursuing scientific research during the McCarthy era of the 1950s, Frank retreated to a small town in Colorado and became a cattle rancher. Before long, his passion for knowledge and learning led him back to teaching, and he began to share his view of the world with students at the local high school. And what was interesting about this response to the Manhattan Project is recreating a better alternative, right? So he couldn't do military funded research anymore, big physics research anymore. So he went and he worked with kids in high schools using farm equipment to develop interesting, wondrous displays. Have a look at I want you to each to find something in the Exploratorium, because it's really the best embodied experience of it's the parent of all the horrible, dumb, red button pushing, didactic science museums that have come thereafter. This one's based on wonder, big funny mirrors and cloud machines, and I would have loved to have grown up in there. So I think this is probably a better base reference than the BuzzFeed one. Just have a look at, spend a few minutes looking at what is there in terms of exhibits. You must have explore, maybe activities. Make your own telescope, solar views, a Bernoulli levitator, memory solitude. Oh, maybe we could do this. Looking at measuring your rolling feet, your worn patterns on your shoes. Antarctic geology. Okay. Spend a bit of time on this and find one that you like, because I think you would like, actually let me formulate this into an assignment. Adapt something that you find wondrous and lovely from this. Use that to think about a small installation in your green space or in our shared LaGuardia space, right? I mean, there is the conceptual art tradition. And I actually would put this in the conceptual art tradition of institutional critique. It was a critique of natural history museums, right? And that science would be taught as this display of organized knowledge, rather than this wondrous looking at the beating heart of a frog, or making your own rainbows, or building a motor or a Geiger counter that you could take out and explore with you. Okay, so again, creative agency over our institutions, our places, how we work, where we work, and what we work on, right? To go back now to the example of Little Red, Elizabeth Irwin, big pink oak tradition, Rosenberg parents. The interesting thing about the police violence marches, did any of you participate in the police violence marches? Black Lives Matter? No? Do you know who who did the police violence marches against police violence marches in New York City? It wasn't actually college students. It was high school students.
Really?
It was high school students. And Little Red, Elizabeth Irwin, kids, and I think that's really bright, right? We're not going to beat up high school students, right? They walked out of school. It's just a small demonstration. They spoke to the press. They said, we don't want this. You know, this is a school that social justice is the theme. They have the first transsexual school president in the country. They have, and you know when they walked out, do you know who came with them? Their teachers. And I thought it was just such a lovely display of kids saying, we've been talking about this, or, you know, what can we do? And them marching. Now, you know my critique of marches, but it demonstrated that these kids had some agency over the, actually, I am going to show you what I would have had them do just quickly, because I think it pushes a little further concrete ideas of agency. But while I'm pulling this up, let's go around and give some example of a positive experience that you've had in participating in social or environmental change, and you're participating in some way. Do you have any examples?
I remember about 3 years ago when there was a debate on whether or not to build the Keystone pipeline from Canada to Texas. And our school also has this debate, and I was in the environment class. And we, in the school, we had a lot of debates, and there was a protest in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House. And one of our schoolmates actually went there, and he got arrested, and he posted the photo of he got arrested on Facebook, and everyone in the school gets very inspired, and there was a very good atmosphere that everyone wants to put efforts in this.
Yeah, because you knew he was one of yours, right?
Yeah.
And you identified entirely with him, and you knew the debate, and you agreed with him, right? I, almost lost my job as my first faculty job when I got all my Yale students arrested in the World Economic Forum marches. But so not a good academic mood. But it's something, and the rousing feeling of identifying with the community. What happened with that? That's actually been a success, right? The prevention of the pipeline. It's a great success. We can't tell whether that was a critical part. Maybe it requires 100 examples like that. Maybe just 1 or 2 is enough. But never doubt the importance of small groups. As the famous quote goes. Can someone also quote the Jane Jacobs quote? You guys know it? It's terribly overquoted. Never doubt the power of small groups. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens, can you stop with your stupid ads, can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Okay, you have an example from your... So how you did high school here in the US, but you were born in China? So you did school up to...
I moved here in 11th grade.
Wow, that's a hard time to move. You have to jump into the most intense schooling straight away, junior year. And you managed. Well done. 16, is that right? 15?
16.
And how was your English when you arrived?
Not good. I could only understand 50% of my class.
Wow. Here's a toast to that. And how long did it take you? A year or so to get kind of really where you understood everything?
About half year, because everything is English environment, including the class and the dorm and the sports activities.
I see. Right. And so you just made do by following until you understood. Has anybody been in that kind of environment? I think it's the most challenging.
I moved also my junior year to a school in Italy, but it was an international school where I already spoke English, so I understood
Right.
the language. But
Right.
half of the students spoke Italian, so it was a little bit
Right.
different.
They say, in a way, international. Has everyone done an international year abroad, or you're still doing? Would you agree with the statement that it's the most transformative educational experience of your life? And why is that?
For me, it completely opened up my horizons, and I met people that I never would have met from where I grew up. I met diplomats who had parents working for the UN, working to clean water. You know, one of them was the head of the World Bank, water economic something.
Oh, really?
It was
Great
amazing.
connection.
Yeah. They brought me to Thailand to volunteer for elephants. It was amazing.
Wow.
I never would have met those people otherwise.
Right. And there's something else about the local. I mean, yes, you meet people, radically changes your network and who you understand and who you sympathize with. But what else does it do?
You see other perspectives,
See other,
defined by culture.
right? And in doing so, you have to reinvent yourself, right? You have to reinvent who you are. It's a most intense period of creative agency, I would argue. Trying to figure out.
Comfort zone for me as well.
Yeah?
Do you know what is comfort zone?
Comfort zone. To
yes.
be completely no comfort zone, right? Zero.
Hmm.
Yeah. And just exhausting, but thrilling and amazing.
Hmm.
And yeah, you all value that experience. So that, I think, is when you are, that's the state of creative agency that I think is when you're kind of, everything is up for grabs, right? You have to make sense of things again. And what happens and this is, I think, one of the big points that comes out of what we're up against. LaGuardia Place makes perfect sense. The way they're doing it makes perfect sense. It's the way they've always done it, right? The landscape architect, NYU is being very lauded for contributing some funds and to the
Renovation.
The renovation that the Parks Department is doing, and right, but no one's kind of had that part of the process where it says, what could we really do here? You know, if we really reimagined it, if we really seized this current opportunity and reinvented ourselves, our space to be better. There's Daisy, she's doing a design thesis at RCA that I'm actually commenting on, Daisy Ginsburg. And essentially, her entire PhD is on what is better. Right? What do we think is better? What is better for you guys? Why was that better? Why was that student being arrested somehow better than as an educational experience, as a citizen? Why was it better than not participating in it in any way? Did you feel more engaged in? You feel like it was not something that was just going on in the background that you weren't paying attention to, that you could have a class discussion about, that it changed the stakes, didn't it? It changed to actually feeling involved, actually feeling like you had skin in the game. Yeah?
Especially during that time when I first came here, and I first felt like the Keystone Pipeline is just another country's business, and
Right.
I didn't feel attached to it. But when one of my schoolmates got arrested, I feel like I want to do something.
Yeah, yeah. It's really a beautiful example. Changing. It's a big infrastructure. What can I do about it? Right? It's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't want it. It's not that we want big, huge pipelines and oil dependency, gas lines, natural gas, and the tar sands ripping up thousands and thousands of indigenous. Beautiful. Have you seen it before? The Naomi Klein movie? Did you guys see it? You really should see it. Whatever. It's not my style of telling stories, but it's vivid imagery of what the tar sands looks like now, where that gas comes from versus what it was. And there was a beautiful exhibition in DC. I'll send a link to you, actually. Okay, so I want more examples of when you felt creatively engaged or engaged in a process, a collective process.
There's an organization called Techo all over Latin America, and the
What's it called?
Techo is like a roof in Spanish.
Really?
Techo.
Like all under one roof?
So what they want to do is battle extreme poverty. And in Latin America, there's a lot of people who don't have a house, so their project is to do fundraising and go build houses, but also establish with the family a plan on how they're going to maintain their house and their land. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I founded a club in my high school to do that. So we did fundraising and then we went and built the houses with them.
What was the name? Thatcher? Is that what you said?
Techo.
Techo.
TECH.
That's good tech. Thing. And so you actually founded the organization?
Not the organization, but the club.
I mean, founded the local chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does it still exist? Did
Yeah.
somebody keep it going?
Yeah, I think so.
That's great.
Last time we talked to them, which was last semester.
That's great.
Yeah.
What a great legacy to leave.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah, it was like your elephant experience, right? This idea of really connecting with.
Yeah, it's really. It's a whole weekend from like Thursday to Sunday, and you leave town, and like where they live, there's no electricity or running water or like cell phone signal. So it's really immersive. And it's not that we build and then the people move in, but we build with the people that are going to receive the house. So, I mean,
What's the critique of Engineers Without Borders and the Peace Corps? What's the critique of that? This is to compare to this.
Like what you were saying, with the rich people who can afford to do stuff going and like fixing other people's problems instead of fixing the problems with them.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of going and participating, in this case, you are there and you might not know much, but you're learning as much from them and they're learning, they're having your resources and interest, and it's a shared problem. It's like the Manhattan Project, right? It's a short, intense time where you're all working on a shared problem, bringing different perspectives, having good ideas, and doing something together. And it really felt like participation.
Yeah, you need to love them family because you build with them, and then at like lunchtime, they're the ones that cook you lunch,
Right.
and then you go to their another house and eat with them.
Right. Right.
NYU Ghana has a program that I think you would find pretty interesting. I don't really know the specifics, but I know that it's kind of an integrated community learning session where people that go to NYU Ghana Accra, they can learn how to make cocoa butter, which is one of the big products that Ghana is able to trade. So it's actually not just going in and kind of giving like charity, which may not be helpful.
Did you go on that?
Oh, I was supposed to go last semester, but they closed it because of.
Oh yeah, because of Zika. Yeah, it was Zika. Yeah.
Virus.
Zika virus. Yeah.
And Ebola too.
Oh, it was Ebola. Yes, that's right. It was pre-Zika. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Ebola.
Yeah. But that
Yeah.
was a project that I thought you might find interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, because it's legitimate participation, right? It's not signing a petition. It's not. I don't know, going in there saying, here, we've got the designs. It's some sort of legitimate participation. How many opportunities have you had at that in your high school careers to really feel like you're legitimately participating in a shared problem? This is the kind of general critique of this xCLASS, my pedagogical projects, of education systems, that once you ossify them into standards and you know, SAT, and here's what you have to learn, does that feel like vivid, interesting, important knowledge that you have to apply to solve an issue to build a non-leaking roof, right? Do you find yourself drawing on your SAT prep? No, right? Living learning is something that's done through active participation, through convivial sense making. You can draw on your principles or your physics slogans. And in fact, it's one of the things that I use as a metric of success. That you do have this formal knowledge to draw on, and sometimes it can inform your intuition, or does inform you, sometimes in ways you don't know. Mostly not, right? Because we're not taught how to apply our knowledge in legitimate forms of participation where your knowledge counts. Right? And that's the crisis that we're facing, right? As I'm writing this letter, as faculty, as you're writing this letter, how do we participate in this? We want to participate. We'd like to participate. We'd like to participate in an open, accountable way. And we'd like to keep control over what it is that we're participating in, right? We don't want to do the Manhattan Project where I told you about this how do you plant 1 billion trees a year? We do a discussion of this.
Did you know that tree planters actually make very good money?
Really?
In sustainable forestry up in Canada when you go up?
Maybe not in Canada. I don't know.
So this is a startup by UK-based Lauren Fletcher. I'm embarrassed to say she's an Australian engineer out of Oxford, using mapping data, multiple rotor shoots and seed pod, multiple rotor shoots seed pods at specific locations, much like paintball gun shoots pellets, according to the startup teams. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with this idea of this well-funded startup of biocarbon engineering? This is an older thing. I think I've changed the name. Yeah. They were on the UN Solutions panel with me last year, and I was really horrified. Are trees just about planting them, shooting them at like paintballs down into a space? Are they part of an active, interdependent community structure? The efficiency of wind pollination strategies of trees far more efficient than your drones shooting paintballs, right? Fostering diverse, resilient, high canopy complexity, maximizing leaf area index, creating a healthy ecosystem is not about the strategies that we've developed for monoculture of pine forests. Right? Low leaf area index, no, not really inhabited by very diverse organisms. And these people are engineers, they don't have a single bit of interest in the ecosystems that they're interfering with, or the local families who have knowledge and interest and stewardship and ideas. It's this top-down approach, quite literally, to shoot. Okay, so form of Bible participation, to rain down, to take the same data that we're taking, that, afforestation and biochar is the most important part of, and to use drones to, it's a form of participation that I would, as typical, trite, and illegitimate, frankly. I don't want some startup flying around planting thousands of trees. Who are they accountable to? The investors. What's the business model behind it? Forestry, not maximizing leaf area index, not human health. So, keeping a handle on our own, not just problem solving, which is what you were talking about. How the hell do we implement this, right? That's important. But also the problem solving. Why are we implementing this? Why should we implement it? Did you have an example of activism or legitimate participation, or?
I mean, I did something kind of like that Habitat for Humanity project. My school does, or my high school did a lot of, they put a lot of emphasis on like getting outside of the campus and doing projects within class time. So yeah, I did Habitat.
Where are you from again?
Seattle, Washington.
Seattle.
Yeah, and then we had retreats each year for each class, and the sophomore retreat is to go help clean up a forest area and get rid of garbage and stuff. And then I've been part of something else where it's like a concert, or no, it was 4th of July, and you could sign up for the day after cleanup and go around the neighborhoods and clean up. It was actually put on by Starbucks, which is kind of funny. But yeah, so there are little things like that. There are a lot of
There's a lot of beach cleanups like that. Has anybody ever done a beach cleanup where you go along and pick up all the flotsam?
I didn't do a hugely organized one, but when I was doing the elephant thing, we were on the beach and I saw all the trash and I said, okay, we have to clean it up because this is sad.
Yeah. I think let's talk about these, right? Because these are the better instituted ideas of Habitat for Humanity, I think, has lots of good things about it, but it has lots of problems too. Right?
Yeah, well, it definitely didn't feel as personal as that. I think we met the family once that was going to be living in the house, right. But no one else was really involved. It's like the group comes in, we worked for a week, putting in irrigation, and then we left. Right.
So you're cheap labor. And it's a good feeling, but it's.
It would have been better if we had a relationship with what we were even doing there.
Yeah, and if you had to come back, make sure it worked in the way that you had thought it would work, make sure it, if you were accountable, right?
Yeah.
Ongoing accountability. It's one of the big issues.
Definitely.
So the same thing with beach cleanups, right? corporations are very good at funding things that maintain status quo, right? But with beach cleanups, it's something, right? But is it really redesigning our infrastructure? Is it really addressing the plastic pollution issue?
No.
Could we do more?
Well, yeah, because it's kind of saying like, we can do this stuff and we can clean up afterwards, instead of saying we need to fix the first problem,
Right.
what we're doing that's causing what we have to clean up.
Exactly, exactly. So it is a crisis of creative imaginary, right? That event of what you did with Habitat for Humanity took your goodwill, but didn't give you the creative imaginary, creative agency over what you were doing or why you were doing it, or who you were doing it for, or develop the social relationship with that. The same with the beach cleanups, right? You're janitors, right? It's a well-established role. But in fact, what do janitors know? If I had my brothers, I would make janitors the presidents, right? I would make them the school. They know what's going on. In a beach cleanup janitor, right? They know if there's a little crab that's bottle caps, and have it adapted them, and would foster that because they've got the ongoing observation, right? The observation, the engagement leads to ideas of how to make it better. It's this fundamental capacity that we all have that's fundamentally squashed in institutional forms, right? Do you have a Texan story?
Nothing in Texas.
Nothing in Texas. That's interesting.
But I did a service trip in the Dominican Republic with one summer.
Uh-huh.
We were super like integrated with the community.
Mm-hmm.
But
We were there for a month.
Wow.
um,
And there was how many of you?
I think about it was like 20. And we had it. We were like it was really well integrated. So like we worked a lot with the community, and we were like painting and doing like minor construction work. It was all based off of like community needs, wherever they like specifically said that they like we need this. Like, all right, cool, we'll do that. We'll like help facilitate it. Yeah.
And do you any contact maintained with the? Are you going to go back there?
Yeah, I still keep in contact with a couple of them
Yeah.
because they're on Facebook. Because now they all have internet access.
Right.
Which when we first went, they didn't really have much internet access, but like, they had to go out of their way to go to an internet cafe or something. But now like we keep in
Right.
contact with each other.
Right. So how much does that matter?
Pretty well. Yeah.
Right.
Just like to
When you-
know, so just,
Oh, you
continue
think you'll go
contact.
back there sometime?
yeah, I've been planning it for a few years, but
Exactly. This idea of if you allow the development of legitimate social relationships, then you actually feel like you want to go back and see those people, say hi, figure out what's going on. Did it work? How much more do you learn, right? Instead of all of these Peace Corps projects where toilet blocks are sprinkled across the developing and emerging economies, that no one ever goes back to, right? Unless they form those durable social relationships that are independent of the institution. And in fact, the thing that you all said, I think you'd all agree with this statement, that what is transformative about that away experience is the friendships, is the personal connections that they're generative. They lead to other possibilities. And when you institutionalize something well and are well organized, and people celebrate Habitat for Humanity, how, on the basis of we have had, 3,000 homes built this year, right? On the basis of their metrics, not on the basis of the social relationships, the less measurable, but far more generative, actual economy of exchange, the economy of exchange of ideas, of people. You'll go back there. Probably in your lifetime, you'll end up doing a project there, you know, shooting some video there, or working with a crew there, or doing, you know, go back there, you know, something will come of it, right? That is, I think, legitimate participation, right? So how do you create legitimate participation here at home? Right? This is the big challenge that we have now in this university, this time when we're legitimately students and faculty here. How do we participate? So do you want to share your example of your most successful example of? We had the elephants, but there's.
I was also, me and my best friend volunteered in a soup kitchen nearby us when I moved overseas. So we became like the co-presidents, and we brought kids every Wednesday for 3 hours to volunteer at a soup kitchen. And it was amazing because we didn't just stand behind the counter and like, here's your bread, here's your food, here's your whatever, clean the dishes, take out the trash. We actually got to go and just sit and talk with people. And it was a good way to also improve your language skills because it was an international school, so you could practice your Italian and you could learn their stories. And they had really crazy stories. There was one of them who said that he was an escaped convict or a fugitive from the law or something like that. And I don't know if they were just making it up. They had good conversations. It was really nice.
Yeah. And so what is that reinforcing? You weren't playing the actual defined role of what a soup kitchen does, which is deliver food and clean up, right? Efficiently, low cost. You were actually doing something else that is perhaps much more nutritive. And
yeah, they were happy when we were there. Well, I mean, they were all happy when we were there, but like it was a fun thing for all of us, I think.
Yeah. And the possibility of real personal connections and wonderful stories and diverse life, you know, life
Styles.
Courses. Yeah. And how to, I think is really interesting. So I think that that should fuel your creative imaginary, right? That you have all had experiences of it. You know what's essentially involved. It is very much about informal personal relationships. And no one ever tells you that. Actually, in the rest of your professional career, can I just tell you, I wish somebody had told me this when I was young. I thought that going through university was about doing well, right? And I did. I studied reasonably hard, but I did my work. I didn't know it was about forming real relationships of trust with my professors, with my friends. I didn't know it was about people. I thought it was about knowledge and degrees, and but that's just an excuse to work on something hard, like in the Manhattan Project, and figure out, you know, your social relationships. I'm doing another PhD. I've just been accepted into another PhD.
Which one?
Well, my old professor from when I was very young, who ran something called, and you know, I've been trying to fund some research on this for the longest time. And in Australia, you do these lovely PhDs where there's no coursework. You just do papers, right? So you don't have to be there. And I've been trying to fund, he's got something in the last 30 years, he's built, 30 years. He's built something called the Nature Bank, which is the largest collection of natural substances in the world. Here it is at Griffith University. And it's easier to fund a doctoral dissertation because I've been trying to fund research on for over 20 years, the xCLASS Institute and its partners have established and maintained Nature Bank as the cornerstone of a drug discovery program. So he worked with, he's got like 1,500 marine sponges that have been collected, and then looked at the substances in it. Funded by pharma companies initially to build up this huge collection. But can I tell you something about pharma? It's too expensive to develop drugs anymore. We worked with local Aboriginal communities, and they came up with they told them the substances that they use when they get a finger bitten off by a crocodile, which is apparently a very painful thing. And so there's a water reed that you chew into a pastiche, and then you put it on. He was looked at the pain pathways that it damps. Of course, it damps 3 different pain pathways, and is co-developing it as an over-the-counter drug, like aspirin or ibuprofen, with the Aboriginal community. Anyway, so we've been looking at how, the flower essences and the flowers that, how do we create nutraceuticals and new foods out of these? There's not the funding to go through drug discovery anymore, but this is a great resource of Australian things. And so for me, I don't know, I just took a biochemistry class with this guy, right? And I think I did, I'm not sure that I did all the quizzes, but I did them. But over the years, I knew his work. I saw what he was doing. He saw what I was doing. We stayed a little bit in touch. I mean, literally a decade or so went by. And increasingly, things are interesting. I tried to fund a student the last 2 years to work with him, but we didn't get funding through. And so anyway, the easiest way to do it is to have it through that, to be able to systematically run through a whole lot of flower essences that I think might be useful for urban floriculture in many different urban environments. So it's this is kind of a long story that who's in control of those social relations? You are, right? You have an agency over those. You don't have agency over what work you have to do. It's self-created. It really depends critically on your creative agency. Okay, so that's just the discussion. I know you know all of this. This is reinforcing what you know, but I think it's important. No one ever told me this, right? I had to work out in my professional community. I thought, how do you get a gallery in Chelsea? Somehow you go through some formal process and they review your, no, you see them, you see these gallerists at enough openings, you talk to them, they see you actually doing what you're doing, you make your own shows, they come to it. It's actually about really creating your own community, and then they become part of that community, right? It's not a mystical formal process. How do you get funding for a film, right? You don't just apply to 500 different places. In fact, you just make it, right? And people see it, you start screening it, you have your own screening with your friends. Maybe you get that a friend of yours gets it to, a little shorts festival. Maybe you get it into here, and you build a real community about real social relationships, right? So I want to emphasize that, because I think there's not really, at your age, I didn't know that, and maybe I was just stupid, but it really is something you have creative agency over, that you have the capacity to drive, and applies to all sectors of your professional ambitions, right? Convivial learning matters, real durable social relationships matter, working with people and being accountable to them, keeping control over why you're doing something, doing it collectively, those things matter. So with that said, let's go back to the Unity project. We'll have a few minute break, and then we'll actually let's have a look at the Unity image you've done, and then we'll have a break. A couple of
So 1 second.
Like a game perspective, or
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah.
because
So this is with the trees.
yes. So for example, this is the Citibank, and these are the two buildings, right? And then you can choose here the more or less the perspective or the position that you can be. And I think I took like a human perspective, but if you put like less, could be like a dog, or if you put 0, could be like a rat, for example.
Yeah.
So this
Who,
could
okay,
work.
let's any ideas about what perspective each of you wanted to take? Somebody want to take a bird perspective, please? Who wants to be a birdie? Birdie.
How about a squirrel in a tree?
Okay, you can be the squirrel. Lovely. And it'll be really tricky. What do you want to be, Sam?
I can be a bird.
You can be a bird. Lovely. Okay. Do you want to be? There's the imagination and the chutzpah of the red-tailed hawk that chose of all the windows on Berg's library to nest on the president's office window. What genius, right? You could be the red-tailed hawk, which is or you could be, then you could fly around and sit back up on the president's office. That might be fun. What do you want to be? A car, a truck, something brutal?
Sure. That's
You don't have to be.
Someone like
Yeah? A building?
like a neighbor.
Yeah. I think actually the view from one of the, either from maybe one from the NYU apartments. Yeah. Did we get any shots from that?
No.
No, but we could.
Mm,
Okay, so can you also show a couple of the screenshots you showed of it blank? Remember, the idea is to create a shared space with possibilities and memories, right? And ideas. Did zipline?
Yeah.
Or ant? Someone has to be an ant. An ant. Someone has to be. You're more zipline-ish. Maybe you're a neighbor with zipline ambition. Okay. Yeah. So aesthetically, I don't want this to look photorealistic because then it always looks dumb, right? And it looks like we can't do it well enough. It looks uncanny. And I like the images we had where we just had the wireframes. Have those?
The one I sent you yesterday.
Yeah, just if we can look at these.
But are these images?
Yeah. This, sure.
Okay.
So this is the kind of blank thing. What I think would be interesting is to actually use visually, I'm not quite sure how to do it, but just to texture map text onto the buildings, right? Which are ideas about kind of ambient ideas about why can't buildings support, all the questions and ideas about what a desirable future might look like, right? Without having to put everything in there and then putting little framed, highly rendered examples of projects. We can put some butterfly bridges in that the bird could land on.
So you mean that we can print like some copies of the plan and then we write down?
Yeah, actually, that's a good idea.
I can do during the
Print a
break.
few version of it and
In plan,
then,
you mean, right? Or
can you do plan
Okay.
section? I think the sections on either side of
Uh-huh.
LaGuardia and
Okay.
Bleecker, which
Okay.
is our main thing.
Mhm.
Maybe the section of the block up on either side on a Berg's library, the back of Berg's library, which is pretty blank, and the front of Berg's library, because they're, to actually have, maybe we just do the library full of words. you know, texture map it with words because it's a library. Or maybe we put, you know, I'm thinking something like a tweet cloud or something, you know, a topic cloud where we have, it's kind of readable, but it's not advertising, right? It's actually using the building surface as a text surface, because that's not what we care about. And then rendering the trees and green spaces and make their index in ways that, yeah. So if we print that out,
Yes.
and then we can start scribbling on it what we'd like and where we would put things and go from there. Okay, come back in 15 minutes, yeah? It's 10:54. See you at 11:10.